So today we're going to talk about one of my favorite topics. It's the Victorian America, the Victorian era. And this was named after Queen Victoria over in England. In America, even though Victoria ruled, I believe, from the 1840s, it really, we say it began kind of after the Civil War and then before World War One. So this is the thesis. During the Victorian age, the middle class grew comfortable in their identity as Americans. So we're going to be focusing on some pretty fun stuff with the middle class. And then next class, we'll talk about the really wealthy and then the really impoverished. So take a look at these if you want to take some notes. The middle class definitely developed more during this time. We also have bureaucratization, which means that we have management levels. We have different levels. If something has a lot of bureaucracy, it just means there's a lot of levels. And the men, especially white middle class men, became managers during this time. We also have an emphasis on consumerism. So buying stuff, you buy to be American, to prove that you're American. And then communication technology is also happening. So this just shows you how populated we're becoming. So you can see a lot of the big cities are in the Northeast, except for New Orleans and San Francisco. And you could see all the red dots are, kind of towns, right? So this is a picture of a town, and you can see a lot of the electricity going on, a lot of the transportation with the trolleys and lights and trains. This is an important picture. This is the Brooklyn Bridge. And the Brooklyn Bridge is going from New York to Brooklyn, obviously. But the big thing here is that Brooklyn is a suburb, S-U-B-U-R-B. And a lot of us live in suburbs. Like I live in Torrance, it's a suburb. So basically it's a place where, middle class live. And this is Alexander Graham Bell. So he is going to be developing the telephone. This was associated with the telephone. This is a switchboard operator. So when you made a phone call, you'd have to call the switchboard operator and ask her to attach you to somebody else. It's usually women working. And people use this for kind of interesting reasons, ways. For example, you could maybe put the phone in with the baby and say, switchboard operator, can you wake my baby up at 3? Or I've got a pot roast in the oven. Can you call me at 4 to remind me? Okay, so now what we're going to talk about is standardization, 3 different things with standardization, and we're going to start with time. So as a country, we're trying to become more united. And what ends up happening is we've got trains and we've got offices, where you've got to punch a clock. And if you're in San Francisco, it could be noon. And what you do is you look up ahead, and when the sun is directly overhead, you say it's noon. But the problem is over in Sacramento, it could be 12:05. So what we decided is that we would have standardized time. In other words, like California will be 8 o'clock, Colorado would be 9 o'clock, Minnesota would be 10 o'clock. So what you're going to do is you're going to convince your local townspeople advantages of standardized time. So remember what I said about offices and trains. What some people would say is, no, that goes against God's time. But we really did need standardized time at this point, and it does develop, like I said, around 1880. So this is going to be your first assignment. And then the next thing that needs to be standardized is clothing. So with the Civil War, we made a lot of uniforms, and we realized that people were mostly small, medium, large, extra large, or whatever. And so what you're going to do is you're going to convince your local country store to carry your line of standardized sizes and designs. Please put in there that people at this time thought that homemade was old-fashioned and that factory-made would be better. It also, think about cost, which costs more, and just some of the advantages. So that's your second assignment. Okay, so this would be clothing at this time. So obviously we've got these ladies with corsets and with these tiny little waists. There was some rumors that women had like ribs removed and stuff, but probably not. So you could buy a corset here. This is called the Invigorator corset. It's supposed to give you more energy, which I doubt very much. But what happened during this time, and we will be discussing this on a later assignment for this video, but the upper class and the middle class were wearing corsets. So you all are too young or not the right gender to have babies. But if you have a baby when you're pregnant, the organs will grow, will kind of form around the baby. So that's exactly what happened with corsets. Is this woman to the left is upper class or middle class, and so her organs are in a different place than the lower class who's probably working as a maid or a laborer or whatever, and she's not going to wear a corset. So what happened is when they did autopsies, they said, oh, this proves that upper and middle class are like almost like a different species, and we'll talk about that later. So this is what's considered a good woman, and this whole thing that we talked about with the cult of domesticity with the good woman versus the bad woman is definitely developing during this time. This is a bad woman. So she's got her hair loose. She's sitting on the lap of a man. She doesn't look disgusted by that. She doesn't have her hands covered. She definitely doesn't have a corset on. Okay, so another thing that is standardized besides time and clothing is work. And this is the birth of the assembly line. So you probably recognize with Ford, you know, the auto parts, they used an assembly line. What I want you to do for this assignment is to figure out something that could be an assembly line, like maybe I'm making an imaginary ice cream sundae or whatever. And then also make sure you answer this question: what would be a downside for the workers of the assembly line? So figure out how the tasks are divided up and then what's the downside. So this is a picture of, I believe it's Ford. Now, this is a later picture from the 1940s, and what it's showing is that the workers become kind of part of the machinery. So be thinking about that with the downside. Okay, so we've done standardization, right? This is how we're making ourselves united as a country with time, clothing, and work. But now we're going to focus on the middle class. And like I said, next lecture, we'll talk about the lower class. So if you are middle class, the suburbs are growing like crazy. And the way that you'd pick your home is through these catalogs. And Sears Roebuck used to be huge, where you could be in Iowa or Illinois or Arizona or North Dakota, and you could buy something from Sears Roebuck and you could be American. So people would choose a house out of this catalog, and then the parts would come. So you'd buy a beautiful house for $1,200 or a complete home here, exterior view and floor plan for a suburban middle class home. And this is one for a mill hand. And then I guess you'd put it together, have people put it together for you. But this was the largest building boom to date in the suburbs. So question 4, during the Victorian era, some people bought their homes through catalogs. Pretend as if you're trying to sell city cottages in one of several styles from your catalog. Let the potential customer know that accessories may be purchased for additional money. And I do need kind of a list of some accessories that would be for full credit. Okay, so in 1880, we said that people must be educated. So this was mandatory education. So we're going to get people that are working. These guys are police officers, prospective police officers, and they're taking written exams. So again, that's going to be the middle class, men getting more on kind of management office jobs. That's going to be important for a few things later on. But kind of an interesting point is that more men did remain bachelors due to urbanization. Whenever I ask this question, what could the city provide so men wouldn't feel the need to be married? They always say prostitutes. And yeah, okay, that's true. But what else does the city provide? Well, they provide restaurants, they provide room and board, provide laundromats, they provide lots of things that the men can do. So again, there's a lot of men that stay bachelors. 2/5 are not married in their 30s, 1/4 not married in their 40s, 10% never marry. It's a little poem: no wife to scold me, no children to argue. God bless the happy man who keeps bachelor's hall. This was wallpaper you can get if you're a bachelor. It's Gibson Girls. If you ever go to Disneyland, you can see Gibson ice cream. And she was the it girl, the most popular girl in the early 1900s. Her husband, Charles Gibson, drew her a lot. You can go to a barbershop. You can go to a drugstore, and we'll talk about this later, but morphine, heroin, and marijuana are all legal at this point. You can get it at the drugstore along with your sandwich and your Coke, which probably has cocaine in it. Go to the bar. Now, there also are unmarried ladies who are working girls, and once you're middle class and you are married, you do not work anymore. You don't clean your house and take care of the kids. You have maids that do that. There's a lot of women that are maids who are working, who are lower class. But the middle class is working usually before they're married, and they were called typewriters. So they would have these shirtwaists. We'll talk about the triangle shirtwaist factory in a little next couple lectures. But they would do office work. So here's some women that are cutting up currency. So currency, like money, would be printed out on one page. They would cut it up. These are the largest file cabinets in the world at this point. Women could also be missionaries. So you can see they're riding around on these gentlemen. But why would you want to be a missionary? Well, you don't really have a boss. You don't have to be married. You could be spreading the gospel, going to foreign lands. All right, so middle class, we talked about their housing, their work. Remember, the men are managers, the women are at home. But before they're married, they could be, like I said, typewriters or office clerks. But middle class also was traveling, so they're the Model T, and that was very popular. So what's a big deal about Henry Ford is that he starts this whole thing of you don't save money so that you can put it away. You save it so you can spend it on something else. And where he worked, this is actually a race, but let me tell you about Henry Ford just for a minute, some things I didn't tell you before. He had a hard time holding on to workers because he was so tough, but then he started paying them twice as much as most people did. So they were able to buy their product. So what you're going to do is create a commercial in which you're trying to convince farm women to buy a car. These women were used to being able to travel in the distance a horse could travel in one day from their home. So say, what's the disadvantage of riding a horse? What's the advantage to buying a car? It's question 5. Okay, a big part of middle class is consuming, is buying stuff. And here we have advertising, which I'll talk in a minute. But Charlie, what should we do without this dear little foreign stove? You can see, they're taking care of the baby, right? And so you need that stove. So it's very emotional advertising. Here's some girls that are playing with dolls. And the boy, of course, has his own toys. The kids are definitely kids, and they are having a good time. The lower class, the kids are working. But these kids are definitely allowed to be children. So part of consuming too is this, again, the Sears Roebuck catalog. And again, you can be anywhere in the country and you can buy anything. I actually own that where it says hair waving iron. It's a crimper, so you stick it in the fire and you crimp your hair. So these would be some of the accessories that you could buy for your home. Also, we have, again, ads. So again, they're very emotional, like Mother, here she is, here, meet your mother-in-law. If you want to meet her and you want her to like you, wear Pompeian massage cream. Don't depend on your relatives when you get old. So, your relatives are not going to take care of you. So you better get life insurance. Here they have the best tonics. So a lot of times these tonics were like 95% alcohol. So of course they solved a lot of issues, right? Here is the ideal brain tonic. It's Coca-Cola. And again, at this point, I do believe it still has cocaine in it. Asthma cigarettes. I always thought that was kind of interesting. So the Victorian era saw the beginning of advertising, which businesses influenced people to buy their product by convincing them they were too skinny, too fat, too tall, too short, too restless, blah, 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 and that a product would solve their problem. Create a commercial which demonstrates how a product from this time period can create a need. So you never knew you were fat until this product told you you were, fat and you needed it, right? Okay, so here are some women that are shopping, and this store is selling standardized clothing patterns. And what would happen is if you bought something down below, they would send the money up to the ceiling, and then there would be some men there, and they'd send back down the change. So women at this time, like I said, they're not working. They have maids. So what do? Well, they shop. That's what they do. They shop and they, I don't know, do needlepoint or something. But here is the beginning of some stores. And then here is Macy's. So what's going to happen at this point is, remember, women are naturally good, right? Supposedly, these middle-class women. So what would happen is they might start shoplifting. The stores did not want to stop them from shopping there, so they would never really accuse them. And if they ever went to court, the lawyer and everybody agreed, oh, it must be something wrong with their insides. They must have hemorrhoids or uterus problems or something called kleptomania. Again, they never would say that a middle class or an upper class woman was wrong or sinful or bad. But if a lower class woman was caught stealing even food for her baby, then she was guilty. So this is what you're going to do. You're question 7. You're a lawyer for an upper class socialite who enjoys shoplifting. The defense at the time was hysteria or instability of mind, which was associated with the disease of the female organs. Also include a poor woman who stole because she needed food for a baby. The poor woman is found guilty and the rich woman is found innocent. So you're going to be each lawyer. Okay, so now we're going to talk about the middle class and playing and the strenuous life. So, and this will be our last big point. But you can see that the gentlemen on the left, they're working in offices, and then we see the gentlemen on the right, and they are immigrants, and they are working very hard. So if they got in a fist fight, these two groups, who would win? Well, the immigrants, right, because they're stronger. But that is a big problem. because we believe that white people, white middle class, are superior. So what happened is Teddy Roosevelt, he will become our president later on. You can see he had kind of a high, squeaky voice. You can't see that, but you can see they call him Little Sissy. And he is tired of getting beat up. So he learned gymnastics and boxing. He began to live on kind of a dude ranch in the Dakotas. And he became very, very strong. And he said, well, let me go into the most, the area where I need to be the strongest. So he dove into the corrupt world of politics, and some thugs came to get him, and he beat them up. So this is him later on. So he developed something called the strenuous life. And just to kind of give you a little bit of background, sports before this were seen as immoral and debilitating. Remember the spermatic economy? We talked about that with the cult of domesticity. But now we must make sure not to let the savage nations be stronger than us, right? So we're going to need to start exercising. So that's when they developed these kind of playgrounds. The YMCA was developed at this time, so character and then athletics. Okay, remember we talked about the Irish, and they're coming in, and they are very good boxers. So what would happen is middle-class men would hire them to teach them how to box. Here, things like professional baseball's developed. Women start to, ride these bicycles around. They can't really wear corsets for it. They go to places like Central Park. They might go camping. So again, question 8, the Victorian era argued that middle-class men needed to be more muscular and strong in order to dominate more savage peoples. So this is actually when we start going over like conquering, Hawaii, or conquering, being in the Spanish-American War. Create a commercial material trying to convince middle-class men to take boxing lessons from you. Okay, so just a couple quick points. Victorian era is when we started seeing this idea about Santa Claus. We didn't really talk about Christmas. Remember, you guys, the Puritans thought that Christmas was sinful. We talked about that before. So Charles Dickens, writes, I think it's called The Christmas Story, right? I forget, with Scrooge, and Americans really liked it. So that's when they started doing, presents and Santa Claus and trees and everything. And then the last thing I want you guys to take a look at, which is going to relate to something we're going to do later on, is fan language. So when you're a Victorian woman, you are going on a date or whatever, you go to a ball, you always would have a chaperone, and you're not allowed to really say what you think because you're supposed to be a good girl, right? So what they would do is fan language: fan near the heart, fanning slowly, fanning quickly, let the fan rest in the right cheek. I actually saw this down when we were in Mexico, but they had this there too. But anyways, just take a look at this, because this is going to relate to when we do the 1920s, and the girls are much more outspoken. Okay, that's it. We got it. Thanks, you guys.